Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. And Melanie, thank you for joining me in this conversation.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, if you will you just kind of give a quick introduction of yourself, all of the normal stuff, and then maybe something a little interesting or surprising?
Sure. I am Dr. Melanie Shaw, and I have been in higher education in a variety of roles since, it's been over 2 decades now. And I have done sort of administrative and faculty roles across a variety of institutions, really specializing in online higher ed and specifically working with adult students, many of them pursuing doctoral degrees. So I've had a delightful opportunity to do learning alongside my students on this journey. I am currently the academic program director at National University for the educational counseling program. And I also get to do some adjuncting at other institutions, working from undergraduate humanities kinds of classes all the way up again through those doctoral research classes. And something interesting about me, for Christmas, I got a theremin, which is an instrument that you play by not touching it.
Interesting.
And so I'm having a lot of fun making music through electric currents.
And that's how you got your start, right? Teaching music.
Yes. Exactly right. I was an elementary music teacher and got to spend some time overseas teaching in Department of Defense education schools in Germany, and then moved into school counseling, and then found my way into higher ed. So really worked the whole spectrum of age groups with students.
So we have the theremin, but something I know about you that I just learned is that you also have a nonprofit.
I do. I do. Over the summer, I started the Art Share Foundation, and we partner with local artists and develop some interactive, crafty kind of art thing that can be shared. And then we go and we give it away. And so we've done things like given away customized needlepoint kits with an iconic artist face on it. And this week we're giving away some miniature dioramas that people can assemble. And so engaging people and inviting them into play.
And proving that adults can still learn, because I'm sure you learned a lot as you started a nonprofit.
Exactly. Not only still learn, but still enjoy the journey.
All right. So let's get started with, I guess, the big stuff. There's a lot going on in higher education. I think there's been a lot going on for a long time, right? We've been talking about the enrollment cliff since 2015, 2016. It's finally here. We've got micro credentials that are kind of proliferating the market. You've got the perception issues of higher education. And then we have a lot going on from a Department of Education and a federal standpoint. What do you think is going to be most influential as we navigate all of this over the next couple months to years?
Yeah, I think it's not only an interesting time, but it's a time where I think we're looking to those prophetic voices, to those thought makers who are helping us navigate this interesting space. I think the biggest thing that we're all really focused on is how we use and integrate and leverage and prohibit, in some cases, AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is really shaping a lot of the conversation about how do we serve students in this time and place, and make relevant learning opportunities for them, knowing that they are very well going to emerge into a world ever more reliant on AI. And so I think navigating that, I've seen that as probably the most contentious issue from a faculty perspective. But also one of the, I think, most important for us to be really wrestling with. It's a time of disruption. It's a time of deconstruction. And that causes fear, it causes uncertainty. But for those of us who are looking, it also presents opportunity. And I think that's for those of us who are educators and administrators, and especially for students. And so I think it's hard to predict what this is going to look like. I can tell you that it's going to look very different a year from now than it looks right now. It's evolving that quickly. And so I think, as difficult as it is to discern in this moment, it's really important that we take some active steps in doing so, using the best knowledge we have at the current moment to shape practice for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's great. Let's stick on AI for a second. I don't think that's where we planned on going today,
Yeah.
but how do you see, I guess, higher education moving beyond the fear factor, right? I think there's a lot of confusion about what actually is AI, because it's way more than a chatbot. It's way more than ChatGPT and OpenAI and all of these different elements. How does higher ed need to, I guess, evolve to explore those things and lead the charge, right? Historically, society has looked to institutions of higher education to lead in these areas, to do the research. I don't know that we're in that space right now. So what needs to happen?
Yeah. So I have several thoughts on this. The first is we have got to, as educators, we've got to engage with AI ourselves. So I think that's where our institutions can provide the training for us to have not only opportunities to use it, but maybe even mandate some of that use, and how that can be useful. So providing some professional development around, this week, we'd like you to create your weekly announcement using an AI tool, sort of inviting people into that user experience space. I think that demystifies it a bit. It's been interesting to see how some of our academic integrity tools have tried to partner in this area to ensure that students are using it in a faithful and ethical way. And we've seen that those haven't always worked very well, or they're attuned too high to demonstrate too much of a match when in fact a student was using Grammarly as an editing tool versus, some intentional plagiarism. So I think helping faculty navigate that and learn how to interpret good use. I've been encouraged by the rubric, the sort of permissiveness use rubric, giving faculty some say in how comfortable they are with their students engaging with AI and being upfront, disclosing that. And I think those of us who are looking to our students to teach us how they're using it, and then to really be interested in that, and then to ask, how do we deconstruct these traditional ways of assessing knowledge, knowing that students are using these tools in this way, to ensure that we are able to assess for mastery of knowledge. And I think it's going to look different. I don't think our read, write a paper is a good way of assessing knowledge anymore. And so we're going to have to rethink that. And that's, again, for me, that feels exciting and an opportunity to really rethink some very traditional, sort of stodgy ways of doing assessment. But we need to give faculty the tools to experience AI and to not be, as long as it's shrouded in mystery, it will be met with fear and resistance. And so,
and what you said made me think about something that you and I have talked about in the past. And I think schools of teaching and learning or instructional design use the term authentic assessment all the time. And I think AI is forcing us to recognize that the 5-page paper is not an authentic assessment. So it's forcing us to measure at higher level Bloom's knowledge from anywhere. So how do they apply it, and forcing us to get them to that next level?
I'm so interested in how some of those foundational critical thinking and information literacy skills have once again surged to the forefront of importance. I think it's a
Mhm.
good reminder that those fundamentals really do matter,
Yeah.
because if we can teach students and faculty, if we can teach anyone who's engaging with these how to write a good prompt, how to access information, and then discern the validity of it,
Mhm.
that's just a really useful set of skills to have in this particular moment in time. We want to empower people to be productive and to be efficient. And there is no doubt that efficiencies are going to involve the use of AI.
Mhm.
And so leveraging that in our daily lives in as many ways as possible, and then figuring out how we still grow as intellectually curious people
Mhm.
without creating busy work that students simply aren't interested in doing. I think that's a really cool question to be wrestling with right now.
So when you, I guess similar to that, so we've got AI and the impact that that's having. So when you think about all of our different institution types,
Mhm.
um, are there any that are uniquely positioned to be successful with everything that's going on? Like, is there a type of university that maybe hasn't been noticed before that is now going to, swell up, or vice versa? A university that's been well known for something that in this new market is going to struggle to stay competitive.
Yeah, I think our institutions that are focused on the adult learner and doing that well are really positioned to be successful in this time. I think that not only are they positioned to pay for their education or leverage employer resources to do that. So, in a time of uncertainty around financial aid funding, I think the institutions that have figured out how to be flexible with the adult learner and their needs for
Mhm.
schooling and financing are going to be uniquely positioned to take advantage of a market share. I also think our institutions that focus on career training are
Mhm.
in a really great position. I think it's our traditional institutions that have been solely interested in sort of the traditional high school graduate moving into a residential college situation. These are the ones that are going to have to really struggle and figure out some of the financial funding piece as things shift with the changes that we're seeing at the education national level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you think about the adult student, you started out in elementary education. I think you've taught all ages, probably up into the 90s with some of the programs that you've taught in. What is it that the adult student brings to the classroom that we can focus on and use to elevate the learning experience?
Mark Milliron, who is the president of National University, talks about this group of students as anders. So they're students and parents and
Mhm.
employees and supervisors and military. And so there are so many overlaps in their life Venn diagrams that we have to figure out, how do we allow them space in their busy lives to make learning possible. And we know that lifelong learning is critical,
Mhm.
whether it's a micro credential or whether it's a set of vocational skills or a professional development or a traditional degree. Learning matters, and learning is how we continue to evolve and develop as individuals. So I think that the critical thing is we remember that adult students bring to the learning task so many responsibilities, but also so much experience. And so we need to figure out ways to leverage that experience. We need to not only we know that adult learners want relevant learning. So they want to be connecting what they're learning to their professional experiences. So we need to find tethers to that in the learning. And we also need to find creative ways to give credit to the adult learner who brings a variety of experiences to the learning so that they can accelerate their degree or their credential or whatever it is they're working toward.
Yeah.
The more quickly we can get them to that learning goal, the better poised we will be to serve their needs.
Let's talk about that for just a little bit. Credit, not for experience, but for what they've learned through their experience is something that I think it's been around for a really long time, 1970s, right? We've had Kale, who's really been the thought leader in, standards and expectations for credit for prior learning. But it's still not widespread. We still don't, you and I both worked at a number of institutions. I can honestly not say that two of the institutions that I've worked at have called it the same thing, have had similar policies or similar processes. So when you think about the value that recognizing learning brings to the adult student and the validation that they have when that's recognized, what gets in the way of assessing prior learning?
Yeah. I think it's expertise. I think it's the ability to interpret what it is an adult brings. I think that most of our institutions don't have a person or a team that has the expertise to know what to leverage from the background. So we end up over relying on things like transfer credits, sort of a one-to-one match, when in fact that really limits what we can work with when we're dealing with an adult student who brings a variety of things. Excelsior University was really an early adopter of the idea of credit banking, and they were permissive in sorts of things that they would let a student do, whether it was a CLEP exam or military training. There were a variety of sort of pools that the adult learner could be given credit for. And that required a team that had knowledge of all the wide variety of things. So I think it comes down to fear of not knowing and not having that expertise. I think it's an opportunity for us to partner with entities that have that skill set that can help divine some of those non-traditional ways of learning in ways that can allow us to return to some of that kind of credit banking idea. And you almost have to be willing to get down to sort of unit thinking. Maybe it doesn't count for a whole semester credit class, but maybe it can count for one unit of something. And then you can sort of stack that in a way that can shorten the duration of learning that's required for completion of whatever the program is. I think those creative ways of helping an adult get recognition for the learning that they've already done, it helps not only them achieve their goals quicker, but also avoid some of the redundancies in learning that I think can really trip up adult students who come and say, I've already learned this. I already know how to write a business plan. I already know that whatever the set of skills is, and requiring them to sort of go through traditional ways of demonstrating that knowledge can ultimately result in them not continuing on with the learning. So we want to avoid that whenever we can.
And as I talk to a lot of people that have a PLA process in place, and when I say that, I'm talking more portfolio, right? The experience-based learning. And a lot of them will talk about how students just don't finish, or they'll get halfway through it and they're like, can I just please take the class?
Right.
So what do you think's behind that? Is it our inability to help them translate that knowledge, or is there just such a disconnect that we're never going to get to this point where an applicant, really, in my opinion, right, we should be doing this as part of the transfer evaluation, not 100%. After they've already started. Yeah,
right. Exactly.
But what do we need to do to help them articulate that in a way that makes sense to a faculty member? It's like we have a language problem.
We do. And also, I think we create a bunch of work when there might not need to be so much work put on the student, maybe we can give them a variety of ways of getting to that portfolio, whatever
Right.
that looks like, sort of creating some multimodal options for them to do that. If it's a 20-page paper that we're requiring them to submit to demonstrate expertise, I mean, that's daunting for anyone. Or if it's a portfolio of 15 artifacts, sometimes the time factor of compiling all of that is really daunting and can be a discouraging factor. So how can we do that differently? How can we ensure that they've got the knowledge without some of the labor intensiveness? I think that's where some of our external partners who do this work can really be helpful in providing some insights to ways that we might not know about on our own, because we're so closely focused on, did they take this specific class at another institution that way, transferring credit, that we can really get in our own way in terms of that. So yeah, finding that expertise, I think, is key.
Yeah. What do you hear related to accreditation? Sometimes I'll hear, oh, well, accreditors don't like that. But then I see like the credential lab coming out of Higher Learning Commission and all of these different things. So is that a real thing? Is accreditation a real barrier to prior learning assessment, or is it?
No, it's not. Not only is it not, but I think accreditors often look to the institutions to tell them how we're doing it. I think we need a good process in place, and we need evidence and support for that process. But as long as we've done that and we've been explicit about detailing process in our self-study documents, the accreditors are going to trust us in that work. And I find that a lot of times we hide behind accreditation as an excuse for not doing something innovative. And I think that's a mistake, because I think not only does it get in the way of innovation, but it also maybe gives more power to the accrediting agencies than they're asking for. They want us to do good work, and they want us to focus on student success. And if we can document how and why we're doing that, I think that that's going to be a celebrated outcome.
Great. So you've talked a lot about kind of the adult serving institutions. If you think about a more traditional institution that's wrestling with, we might need to expand the type of student that we're attracting, where should they start? What should they start thinking about?
I think that a lot of the institutions have been doing this in a sort of informal way, with
a post-COVID way too, right? Very post-COVID way.
Exactly. We used to call these departments things like professional and continuing education. It was sort of like the cousin, the distant cousin of the institution that dealt with the adult learner. I think we need to be really leaning into these departments and leveraging that experience, leveraging that population, because I think if most traditional institutions they're going to find that this subset of students exists. It's just been under-nurtured at their institution. And a lot of times the people who have been running those programs are the very ones who have the expertise in doing this well and can be a real asset to the institution as it needs to pivot in this way, and rethink the student body. And so, the good news is you've probably got the expertise. The bad news is you've probably been underutilizing it for years, even post-COVID.
and the question that I ask sometimes is, are we at 40 million or 42 million? Some college, no degree. What would 0.5% of that population do for your institution?
Right.
It's huge. It's so many people.
Huge. It solves the enrollment cliff, ultimately. If you can figure out ways to get completers back to the table and make that navigable for them, problem solved. Endowment fund secure.
And what do you think that does? And maybe it's nothing, but when you think about just kind of the negative perception of higher education, which I don't buy into,
Right.
we have a perception problem for sure.
Yeah.
But do you think bringing those people back into the ecosystem does anything to respond to higher education is
Oh,
just
yeah.
not relevant anymore?
Absolutely. I think you build relevance in the very people who may have had such a disgruntled experience that they left for whatever reason. And now we make that initial goal possible for them. All of a sudden, that becomes a deferred dream fulfilled. That feels good. And that's important work. But I also think, we've been elitist in higher education in a lot of ways. And we have put barriers up that do get in the way of the non traditional learner degree completion. And so we need to stop that because that's not helpful. And there's no institution's reputation that's worth tarnishing the perception of higher education by a group, a subset of people. We need to make learning accessible to all of them and in the variety of ways that they're wanting to learn. So maybe it doesn't look like the way we've always thought degrees should look. Maybe we need to rethink that as well. But in doing so, we invite greater flexibility, greater opportunity, and some real chances for innovation. I think that's where we are. I think we've been in a stuck place, and I think we have officially disrupted things.
Yeah.
And so now it's time to pivot and to do something new and to become relevant again.
Yeah. So last official question, but you kind of hit on it already. I think there was this disconnect, or there is this disconnect between industry and the perception of what industry needs, higher education. But there's an argument even in higher education about, well, is it skill development, is it job placement, or is it higher order thinking? And to fill that gap came the micro credential market. Right? There's more than 1 million micro credentials registered in Credential Engine.
Yeah.
What does that do? Are some of them are validated, some of them are not? Do schools digest them and award credit for them? What do we do with all of these micro credentials?
Yeah. Yes, we need to find ways to make them a part of that. The student's going to come with a unique set of baggage,
Yep.
learning baggage that we need to figure out how to organize with them for them.
Right.
And I think we need to lean on industry to do that well. I think we need to invite the industry partners into this space to ask them, what are they needing? We're ultimately preparing the workforce of tomorrow in whatever way that looks like, whether that's through degrees or micro credentials or professional development or whatever it is. Ultimately, we are giving students the skills that they will need to navigate the workplace of tomorrow. And so we traditional academics often don't have the answers of what the workplace is really needing.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to leverage that expertise by partnering with those stakeholders and asking them, what do they need? And again, I think those our continuing education folks at our traditional institutions have been doing a lot of that work. They've been out in the community. They've been partnering with the power company to train linemen, to do, that sort of thing. And so we've got those connections. We've got that network, and we can expand that and figure out what it is, what can we be teaching today that will translate into the workforce tomorrow? And yes, we need to make all of those ways that students have showed up at the learning with their experience, with their prior knowledge, and absolutely put it to work in a way that can shape their unique learning journey to goal.
That's fantastic. So thank you for everything. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Is there anything else you want to put out to the world before we call it a day?
I think just keep learning. While the current moment is uncertain and chaotic, we will get through this. And if we will lean in and find ways to be relevant and student centered in all that we do, we're going to emerge even better from this uncertain time. So I look forward to partnering with all of you on that journey.
And if people want to get in touch with you,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, email.
Yes, all of the above. I am melshaw3 at nu.edu is my email address. But yes, you can find me online on LinkedIn and the ArtShare Foundation if you're interested in arts and nonprofit work. I'd love to see you in that space as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for listening. And thank you, Melanie, for the great conversation about the value of the adult learner.